girls are going to be gushed out with just a finger. Like, how is that even possible? These girls are responsible for one of the most heinous crimes committed in the early 1900s. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today is the 5 of 10 days of terror, and we are in for a ride. We are going to be talking about the PAPIN sisters. Remember to please like the video if you enjoy it, and subscribe for more content just like this. So let's go to Le Maids, France, where we are going to meet the PAPIN family. So Gustave Papin was the father of the girls, obviously, and so he was in a relationship with a lady called Clemence, and it was rumored that she was actually dating her boss while she was in a relationship with this guy, and Gustave still stayed with her. Probably that was common at that time. And when she got pregnant, he decided to marry her, and they got married in October of 1901, and 5 months later they had their first child, Emilia. Soon after that, they got Christine and Leah. Christine Papin was born on the 5th of March 1905, and her mother was said not to be nurturing. She did not really want to be a mother. She was not really into that life and was not really willing to take care of the child. So they ended up sending her to her aunt from her father's side, who kind of looked after her. Later on, they had a third child, Leah Papin, on the 15th of September 1911. So they are 6 years apart. And Mencia ended up sending her again to another family member to live with. She just really never wanted to be a mother. And even after marrying Gustave, she still continued. It was rumored that she still continued to have a relationship with her employer, and at that time Gustave wanted that to stop, so he got a job in another city and they were supposed to leave Le Maids, but Clemence vowed that she would rather unalive herself than leave that city. So the guy just stayed. I think he was stuck in a marriage and soon became a heavy drinker. But Gustave was not without faults, because he was said to have been assaulting his daughters at a very young age. Like, Emilia just when she was 10 years old, and the crazy part is when Clemence found out about that, she said Emilia had seduced her husband. So the 10-year-old innocent little girl whose innocence has just been taken away was the one who seduced her father to do such cruel acts to her. So it was just crazy, and for that reason Clemence decided to send Emilia to a convent. It was like an orphanage where the nuns had very strict rules and disciplines for the girls who lived there with them. So she sent her to that type of a place. A few months after being sent to the convent, Emilia was joined by Christine and Leah. So this lady wanted this convent to raise her daughters until they were 15 years old, where they're eligible to have a job and give her money so she can live a better life, and she'll take them back. But those plans actually crumbled because Emilia decided to become a nun, and she was pissed because if you're a nun, how are you going to work for her and give her money? She's not going to be able to live there. So Emilia became a nun, and Christine wanted to follow in the same footsteps, and her mom was just going to lose it. So she got the girls out of the convent, and they're already ready to get jobs. She got them out of the convent and put them into a workforce. At this time, she and Gustave had already divorced sometime in 1913. It honestly feels like their mom wanted to punish the girls, or especially Emilia, for, and at least in her mind, seducing her father, because sending her to this orphanage where the life there is strict rules, it's really hard. It felt like a satisfying punishment to her to send her daughter there, and then the rest of them at the same time having a whole new organization raise the girls for her, raise these armies for her that will be well trained to become good maids when they finally leave the convent. And all this while, she has divorced Gustave, she's free, she has no kids on her plate, and she's just free to do whatever she wants. So she wanted it on both sides. Emilia, on the other hand, enjoyed being there. I mean, she was no longer with an abusive father, she was no longer with a mom who was never really a mom. And she just had these rules, and that's why she really enjoyed being there and decided to become a nun. And that's when all of their mom's plans failed because she felt like she was losing in on whatever. She was losing in on the money that Emilia should have been making for her if she decided to start working. So by the time Clemenza found out that Christine was about to follow Emilia's path, she pulled her out of the orphanage and put her immediately to work. And because she had learned how to cook, clean, and do all the chores at the nun's place, she was actually really good at it. So Christine is going to work from house to house and was able to make some money, and she would give all of that money to her mom. But her mom was not satisfied because she felt like she could make more and would always move her, okay, go and work here instead, or work here, just looking for where she can have a better pay. And still, it was not enough. So she brought Leah to work with her, and now both girls were working and giving the money to their mom. Because Christine was really good at her job, she would tell her employer, hey, can I have my sister work with me? And so they always found a way to work together. Christine and Leah, they always try to find a way to work together and be together all the time. And people really did not see them communicating with each other. They were just like, you know what I'm thinking right now, let's do it. I don't know, it's like they could think of the same things at the same times, and so they were just really close and worked really well. Actually, the fact that the two sisters were always just close to each other and into each other and were really distant, that's the word I should use. They were distant towards other people but were really clingy to themselves. People found really super weird, but like they always did a good job. So even though it's creepy, there was nothing to complain about. And in 1926, that's when the girls actually found a permanent place to live in. So Christine landed a job at the Lanslin family. Mr. Rene Lanslin was a former solicitor, which is like a lawyer, I believe, at that time. He was a former solicitor, and it seems like they had a lot of money. He lived with his wife, Lionel, and their last daughter, Genevieve, because they had two daughters, but the first one had already gotten married and she lived with her husband in another home in the same town. The Papin sisters lived with Mr. Rene, his wife, and their young daughter, Genevieve. Finding a job as a chambermaid was something more stable, and she would have somewhere to live in, food, take water, she would be taken care of, and she would just have to work for this family. But before landing to that job, she had a previous employer who had warned this family that, hey, this girl, she does not like to do certain things, which is weird because when you're a maid, these are things that your employers are paying you and they're expecting you to do for them. So that was weird, but this family ended up trusting her and still giving her this job. And for the most part, she did a really good job because the madam of the house was really impressed by her work. And after working for them really well for a few months, she spoke with the madam that, hey, can I have my sister come and work over here? And Leah was also employed as a chambermaid. So now we had the two sisters living in the same house. And also, when someone is doing such good work for you, you just feel like the next person is going to be as good, and the sister actually was. So the Papin sisters lived in this house. They were both maids now, and they had really long hours. They were literally working 14 hours a day, and they had a half day a week. So it's not like you have one day off. They had a half day off per week, and that's just a lot of time working. And they had no interest in other things. Like, it's true they don't have that much time. When you're so exhausted from walking up and down in the house, the next thing you're thinking about is to sleep. But they were not really interested in other activities, maybe going out to do something, or I don't know, any other activity that mates could probably have the time to indulge in. They were just interested in each other. And also it was really creepy that they always did the thing that, you know what I'm thinking, and we just go and do it. They were not really talking to each other or talking to other people. That creepy stuff they did, yeah, they also did it in this house. And the two sisters only had one activity that they could participate in, and that was going to church on a Sunday. Yep. At some point, Leonie, now the madam of the house, discovered that these girls were sending every penny they made each month to their mother, and she was crazy. She was like, what? And she just asked the girls, no, you're not sending this money anymore. And she actually wrote a letter to their mom just telling her the money has stopped. She has asked the girls to keep this money for herself. So she really kind of liked them, and that's like a really protective thing to do for absolute strangers. So it was the family really loved the girls because they were doing like good quality work. And at some point they actually gave them a room that had a balcony. That I think that was a big deal at that time, if it's been mentioned. Like they could see the city when they're not working, so they both had to share the room, obviously, but it was a room with a balcony, which seemed to be like a big deal because it was just their way of appreciating them and really being grateful for the work that they have been doing. So the girls have been working for this family for like years, and I read somewhere that at some point Leonie, the madam of the house, developed a depression, and she was just a little more critical to whatever the girls were doing. That was what I learned. But because there's no other explanation as to why the great work they had been doing just changed, or maybe she felt like they had become too close to the family and they were giving less quality of work. Honestly, that could be it, because sometimes when you bring people too close that work for you, the quality of work reduces. I have experienced that. I have seen that happen. But I also read that she had a depression, so I'm not sure which one is which. But she became more critical about their work and was always criticizing them. She began to abuse the girls. She went as far as pinching Leah when she has missed a spot to have her do it again, and this was definitely pissing her off. Leah actually told Christine that if that stuff happened again, she was going to fight back if the madam tried to pinch her again. And this brings us to February 2nd, 1933, when all hell broke loose. So on this day, Rene was supposed to meet his wife and Genevieve, his daughter, at a friend's house. They were supposed to have dinner at a family friend's house. So he was supposed to leave work, arrive the family friend's house, and have dinner with them, and they all go home. But when he arrived there, his wife and daughter had not come to the meeting. So it was weird, and he began to look for them. He went to town to check around, could not find them, so he decided to go home. When he arrived home, it was really dark. Everywhere was dark, which is really strange because they had a mansion, they had a lot of money, everywhere should be lit up by the time it gets dark, everywhere the lights should be on all over. So he tried to open the doors to get into the house, and he's beginning to get worried, but his key did not work and everywhere was locked. All the lights coming from the house was just one candle lit in a service room, and so Rene was unable to get into the house, and he decided to go and get the police. So the police came back with Rene to his mansion, and they tried to like snake around, climbed over the fence and got into the compound, and they tried to check all the doors, but they were unable to open all the other doors. But they finally found one door that was open, and so the police, just moving around with their flashlight, were trying to find out what is going on in this house, and also trying not to give away that they are present so that whoever is there should run away. But they just thought maybe it's a break-in or something, and I can only imagine what Rene would be thinking. His entire family is nowhere to be found, and he has no idea what's going on in his house. Like, it must have been crazy. So the police are moving around with their torch, and they did not find anything around, so they're trying to go up the stairs. And as they're moving up the stairs, they found an eyeball, like an actual eyeball. Like, I don't know if you've watched movies, but when an eyeball is out of the socket, it probably looks big. It's a lot bigger. There's no light, just a flashlight. It must have been scary to whosoever was there. But yeah, the police kept moving, and when they arrived at the top of the stairs, they found the bodies of Lionel, the madam of the house, and Genevieve, Rene's daughter, lying down there lifeless. And it was a bloody mess because their eyes had been gushed out. Like, warning, graphic details being explained now for like the next 2 minutes. Yeah, their eyes had been gushed out, and their bodies had been slashed so many times. Like, the butt and the legs, it seemed like a knife had just been used to slice them open. Like, who does that? their face had been deformed and been slashed so many times, and they were literally beaten to a pulp. Like, imagine taking a grape and probably hitting it with something. That's how deformed their bodies looked. So the police knew that there were other people in this house. There are servants everywhere, and they start moving in the different rooms and checking everyone. And they arrive at the PAPIN sisters' room, their new chamber that has a balcony that was given to them for their good job. The room was closed and the police had to force their way in, and when they opened it, the two sisters, Leah and Christine, just lay in bed quietly with their bathrobes on. So they had taken a cool shower after their activity and they just lay in bed with their bathrobes, and just next to them the police saw a hammer that literally had particles of a brain on it, and there was blood all over it. So the police immediately know that they have committed that crime, and all they could ask them was, why did you do it? And the sisters explained that Leonie was going to beat them, and they were just like, I'm done with this, I'm not going to have this today, and they decided to take care of the situation. So Leonie was going to beat them because the ironing was not done. So I would imagine they were going for an evening dinner at a friend's house. Probably one of those big dresses needed to be really ironed and straight, and the ironing was not done, so she was probably pissed about that and wanted to beat the girls, but the girls would not have it. And the girls explained that the reason why the ironing was not done was because the iron was faulty, and when they plugged it in, it shorted the whole house, and that's why there was no light in the house that day. And that was also why they were unable to do the ironing, but they were going to beat them, so they decided to do what they could to defend themselves. The crazy part is the girls showed no remorse as they explained what they had done. So Christine told the police that when Leonie arrived to the house, and she was just pissed, first because there was no light, second because the ironing was not done and she was just back from shopping and needed to use the dress. And so she tried to put her hand on Christine, and Christine went straight for her eyes and gouged out her eyes with her fingers. And she was just explaining to the police like you're telling someone a normal story. So as Christine was doing that to Leonie, the madam of the house, she simultaneously told Leah to do the same thing to Genevieve, the daughter. Like, what does that girl have to do with it? Maybe she might have been a B-word, being the mistress of the house, but they both have their eyes gouged out and they're standing there bleeding and probably helpless. And then Christine went to probably the storage room and got a hammer and a knife and brought it back, and she gave the knife to Leah and she used the hammer, and they just kept beating into their faces. That's why I said they were beaten to like a pulp. Kept beating into their faces with a hammer, and they used the knife to stab and slice them multiple times. So this is probably them exchanging the equipments and carrying out the activity to both mother and daughter at the same time. It was just really crazy. Okay, so there's a little, if you're eating, this is going to be disgusting, plain out disgusting. So I just want to give out that warning. So after bashing their face with the hammer, they took the knife and rotating it, they lifted up the skirts of both women. And I don't know at what point they had already even died, but they lifted up their skirts and they were slicing the feet up to their buttocks, and later on went to Genevieve's menstrual blood, literally took it out and smeared both mother and daughter with them. Like, ugh, that is just plain disgusting. Imagine when you're preparing probably meat or something to cook. That's literally what they felt like they were doing with those women. And the crazy part is they feel like they were defending themselves. Like, when you have someone, both of them blind and bleeding and just begging, probably, what more defense do you need to do there? I'm trying to imagine what these ladies were thinking when they were doing this. Probably all the pain and hardship they have ever been through, they were taking it out on the only family that had actually been really caring and loving to them and shown them some care. Like, That is a mental case. After the police had heard all of what they had done, they started gathering the evidence or the murder weapons, because they had actually used a pot to bash both women's faces with it. So they probably had hammers, the pot, the knives, whatever. The police gathered everything and arrested both ladies. And when they were done with committing that, they had gone and taken a shower, like it was just another day at work, and they were ready for bed. That's why they were in bed. So the police got them, and the sisters were given a court-appointed attorney who ended up pleading insanity, because that's the only thing that actually makes sense for someone to be able to commit such a heinous crime. Both sisters, remember, they had been so close, and now they had to live in prison and had to stay in separate cells, which was really difficult for them. They would allow them to see each other occasionally, and someone actually watched them while they visited each other, and they found out that the sisters were behaving weirdly too close or too into each other. And it was a big deal, at least in the 1930s at that time, because these were, first of all, they were sisters, and then they were both girls. So it was like homosexuality at that time was actually regarded as a mental illness. And then being between two sisters was just like, sadly, Leonie and her daughter were buried. They actually had a really nice procession, because Leonie was carried by a black horse and they walked them by the street, while Genevieve was in a white casket and a white horse, and they walked them down the street, and a lot of people came out to pay their respects, probably because they're already a rich family. But a weird thing is, a lot of people, at least some people, supported the PAPIN sisters. They probably felt like this was a crime committed because they had suffered a lot of torture, because there was a really huge class war at that time. So a lot of people still supported the PAPIN sisters. Like, there's no amount of class that is going to make someone do something so horrible to another person, a mom and daughter that has been so nice to you. But we don't know it all. We don't know how these girls were treated. But a lot of people supported the PAPIN sisters, and a lot of people obviously hated what they had done. At some point, Christine actually tried to gouge out her own eyes. I mean, I don't know why they stopped her. They should have at least let her get one of them, so she can imagine what those women would have gone through, having their eyes being taken out with literally a finger. It's horrible. So she was restrained before she could do it, and she was just claiming that the same thing that got into her, the time she did that to Leonie and Genevieve, was the same thing that had gotten to her in prison, which was why she tried to do it to herself. Another crazy thing is, both girls actually claimed sole responsibility for the murder. So Christine said she did it on her own, and Leah said she did it on her own. They just tried to point everything to these girls being insane, but the prosecution had 3 psychiatrists that had seen these girls and said these girls are as sane can be, and they were just cold-blooded killers. But the court decided that Christine was the mastermind behind everything, because she was the one who seemed to be more dominating, and Leah just followed or did whatever she said. And so Christine was sentenced to death. She was supposed to be hung at the square or something like that, and it had been over 50 years that a woman had been sentenced to something like that, and so it was going to be a big deal, because she would be the first woman in 50 years to die through that method, to be hung at the square, and everyone is watching. Later on, Christine's sentence to death by guillotine was later changed to life imprisonment, and Leah, who was someone who seemed to just follow her sister's wishes, was given 10 years imprisonment with hard labor. So hard labor was really hard labor at that time, but at least she's only getting 10 years, and she actually got out after serving just 9 years of that. So Christine lived at this mental hospital, and she was just having the worst life ever. She wrote so many letters trying to get in touch with her sister, trying to just see her, try to be in contact with her, and those were not granted, and she was just wasting away. She began to starve herself and actually ended up dying. She even had fits of madness, but she ended up dying on the 18th of May 1937 at just 32 years old. And this was before her sister could finish her term in prison, so she never saw Leah again. Leah ended up getting out just after serving 8 years for good behavior and moved in with her mom and actually got a job. Like, how is that possible? Yeah, she got a job under a fake ID at the hotel, and she was said to have died either in 1982 or 2000 and something, but I'm not sure which, so I'm not going to say which year, but those were the 2 years given for them. What do you guys think about these sisters? This was just, I know their life and their childhood was absolutely hell, but the crimes they committed against this family, like, so it was later discussed that these sisters suffered from a condition where two people are like crazy in a type of way that they are paranoid to everything else around the world except each other, and one of them always dominates the other, which in this case will be Christine dominating Leah. But what do you guys think about these sisters? I feel like this is one of the worst cases to think of, because if you imagine how these crimes were committed, it's just so inhuman for anyone to have to go through that. And we have not really seen a history of this family being so horrible to them. I mean, yeah, Lionel hurt the girls, but still, maybe taking out her eyes should have been punishment enough, even though they would have ended up in prison for sure. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, and Happy New Year, everyone. Oh, this is such a crazy story to bring you guys on a new year, but Happy New Year, and I look forward to having a fun year with you guys. Well, that was it for me today, guys. Remember to be the best version of yourself. See you guys tomorrow with another video just like this.